Hello, I'm Catherine Sines, the president of the Rotary Club of Hudson. Rotary is a professional organization of a group of men and women who support Rotary International. We also join together by a common interest of service to our Hudson community, and we have a sincere desire to give back. We meet weekly on Wednesdays at Laurel Lake Retirement Community, 200 Laurel Lake Drive, in their dining room. We meet from 7:30 to 8:30 and would like to invite you to join us. For more information about Rotary, go to www.rotaryhudson.org. Enjoy the following excerpts from one of our recent meetings and consider joining us on Wednesday morning.
Good morning, Rotarians and guests.
Good morning, Ron.
Welcome to the Rotary Club of Hudson. I'm Ron Strobel, the Sergeant at Arms. Our invocation this morning is by Kelly Brennan.
Good morning.
Good morning, Kelly.
Good morning, Larry.
Bow your heads. Compassionate God, source of all comfort, we pray for the people whose lives have been devastated by rain and flood. Bring them comfort, we pray. Protect the vulnerable, strengthen the weak. Keep at bay the spread of disease. Have mercy on all working to rescue the stranded and feed the hungry. And may our response to their suffering be generous and bring you praise. For we ask it in Jesus' name, amen.
Amen. Now to lead us in the pledge and the four-way test, Larry Santon.
Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
And the four-way test that we try to do each day and each week. Is it the truth? First. Is it the truth? Second.
Is it fair to all concerned?
Third.
Will build goodwill and better friendships.
Fourth.
Will be beneficial to all concerned.
Can I leave now?
Thank you, Larry. Even after I taught you how to count.
Okay.
So lead us in song, Dick Pearsall.
I'm going to try to smooth things out. I had a different song in mind, but in light of the rain and the flood, I think we should sing God Bless America and dedicate it to Texas. Okay? Here we go. God bless America, land that I love. Stand beside her and guide her through the night with the light from above. From the mountains to the prairie, to the ocean, let it flow, let it go. God bless America, my home, sweet home. Great singing, God bless America, my home, sweet home. I worked there in Texas, I think they heard it.
Thank you, Dick. And our president, Catherine Sines.
Good morning, Rotarians.
Good morning, Catherine.
And our hearts and compassion goes out to everyone in Houston and in Texas and everyone else. Even now, I guess it's hitting Louisiana, so we need to keep them in our thoughts and prayers. Next, for introduction of guest, Joe Zapatowski. How'd I do, Joe?
Hey, you did better.
What I meant to say, I gave you an A+. Good morning, Rotarians.
Good morning, Joe.
We have a number of guests here, some who have been here 3 or 4 times. If you would stand and we would acknowledge you. Bob Graves.
Morning, Bob.
Morning. Richard DiPiolo.
Morning,
Richard. John Hopkins. Morning, John. And Sue Carter. Morning, Sue. And my guest today, first-timer, hopefully a future Rotarian, my neighbor, not from across the street, but from across the hall, Ralph Day. Ralph, would you come?
Good morning, Ralph.
Ralph is a former Rotarian some years ago in Pennsylvania. Ralph, if you'd say a few words about yourself.
Good morning.
Good morning.
I moved in across the hall from Joe 2 years ago. I was born in Maple Heights and spent 24 years there.
Mustangs.
Go Mustangs, yeah. Then I left town and didn't come back for 50 years. I mean, except occasional visits from where I was living. My short story about where I've been in all that time was New Jersey, Massachusetts, Minnesota, and then over 40 years in suburban Philadelphia. I was a member of the Swarthmore Rotary for 10 years, and I think it's about the same size club as you have here, and very active. It was a great experience. In my pre-retirement life, I was in new product development, advertising, and marketing. And that's what you do in marketing. You move around. So I'm very pleased that we picked Laurel Lake as a home, and we are settling in. I joined the Congregational Church and looking for other ways to get involved in the community. So that's my plan.
Ralph, as a former school superintendent, you have no idea about moving around.
Thank you, Joe, and welcome to all the visitors. First on our list, Gail Royster, would you like to come up and do your thing? You want Ron to?
Good morning, Rotarians. You may recall at our wonderful gala fundraiser last May, one of our featured beneficiaries was Hudson Community First, which in particular we had zeroed in on a new program that these two wonderful women had inaugurated called What Every Senior Should Know Before Leaving for College. It was a very successful program, and we have basically adopted it. So today we would like to present the big check to them. They did get the real check previously, but Cheryl Rauch and Laura Gasparo are the co-chairs of Hudson Community First, and we are so delighted that you could come this morning and accept the check for $7,000.
Sure, go. Well, on behalf of Community First and all the seniors that were lucky enough to participate in this program, and all the seniors at Hudson High School, over 400 students did participate. It was a wonderful program, and we can't thank you enough for providing the funding for that program. It was well received by both the schools and the parents and the students, so we're very excited. We think they learned a lot of important things that they really do need to know, a lot of practical important things before they head to college. So thank you very much for your support. We appreciate it, and we look forward to another great program next year.
Thank you very much. And Laura just gave me some applications that she wanted me to share with you. They're up here if you would like to do it. It's called, one of the things Hudson Community First is doing now is take a second, make a difference. And it's nomination forms. Do you know someone in your community, kids, teacher, coach, neighbors, merchant, Rotarian, who make a difference? I added Rotarian. For Hudson's youth. Please nominate them below. And I have that applications, nomination forms if you would like one before the day's over. And next, Ed Sogan. In case you didn't see all the signs around town, Taste of Hudson's here.
Taste of Hudson is back. This coming weekend, we will be full throttle on Saturday or Sunday and Monday. I do have a sign-up sheet. There are some openings in regards to setup and tear down. The times are on there, and also there are some openings in regards to ticket sales of the wine and beer garden. This year it's going to be a little bit different. You're not going to buy dining cards. It will be cash, or you can use your credit card at the restaurants, etc. When you do go into the beer and wine garden, you have to buy tickets, and that's the way they keep track of things in that area. Volunteers will report to the volunteer tent, which will be in what they call the valet lot. It's directly across from the wine and beer garden. So if you are volunteering, make sure you come by and you check in and get your t-shirts, etc. for that particular event. Another thing that's going on, again, we're going full throttle with the sports seasons, the marching band, etc. Everybody is fired up for this Friday. We are hosting Strongsville at 7 o'clock at Memorial Stadium. Many of you attend these games, and you know that the first couple of games, the lines are extremely long. You can go and get pre-sale tickets, I think, right after school, right? And during lunchtime, and it avoids you standing in these long lines and be able to get you into the game before the end of the first half if you don't get there on time. Other sports are going on. Again, you've got golf, you've got both boys and girls soccer. The cross-country teams are doing great. They just won a big invitational down in Canton. Last weekend, both the boys and girls, if you look at the hub, you'll see all the successes going on. The boys golf team is going, and girls golf team are going great. And boys tennis is playing, and if you don't realize this, that Tom Tobin's son, Robbie, is one of the stars, and he will pick. Girls tennis? Well, Robbie's practicing. He's getting ready to go, and he's been working and tutoring the girls. I'm sorry. Okay, the boys are in the spring. I was just trying to pump up Rob, and I blew it. Yeah. Okay. So that's about it. But please, if you do have time, participate in regards to volunteering. Many of you have done this in the past, and you're already signed up. But if you haven't, look at the list and see if you can fill in a spot. And please attend. This is going to be a little bit smaller footprint, same number of restaurants, same number of bands, but again, we're back, and I think it's going to be a great event, and the weather is supposed to be phenomenal. Thank you.
Thanks, Ed. And Bob Cramp, did I say it right?
Good morning. We had a great weekend at Art on the Green, as many of you know. It was great to see everybody there and participating, actively involved in that event. The results were very good. First, before I give you dollars, we had, I tried to count up the number of buns and hot brats and dogs we sold. We sold 704 hot dogs and brats, and we had 450 beverages we sold. So from the goal of this is to meet the community and develop a image within the community. I think we did a good job of contacting about 1,000 people. So I think that was very good. Financially, the revenues were $2,043. And the net was $1,408, so a little better this year. And two special thank yous. One, Mary Sogan filled in for one day. She became a runner,
and she didn't know she was going to be doing this, but she did. And of course, my wife's not here, but her involvement in it as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and the brats were really good. I had to have one there and take some home, so they were really good. Next, Jim Ahern, would you like to introduce our speaker? Thanks.
Good morning, Rotary. This is the 5th week where we've covered the subject of energy, and before I introduce Senator John Eklund, I want to take a second and thank him because he filled in the 11th hour for Larry Obhoff, and I really appreciate it because I know your calendar is probably pretty booked well ahead, and to fill in the last minute is super. Throughout the whole month, the theme has been various aspects of traditional energy and renewables and almost everybody brought up policy. And they looked at it and they said made some comments from their own perspective. So it's perfect at the end of the month to have someone who is involved in policy. So let me read a little bit about Senator John Eklund before we get started. He's currently serving his first term as state senator for the 18th district, which is comprised of portions of Geauga County, Lake County, as well as all of Portage County. For the 131st General Assembly, Senator Eklund has been tapped to serve as chairman of the Senate Criminal Justice Committee, as well as vice chair of the Financial Institutions Committee. In addition, Senator Eklund is a member of the Public Utilities Committee, Civil Service, Civil Justice Committee, Ways and Means Committee, Transportation, Commerce and Labor Committee. How did you have time to come here and do this? Yes. Finance General Government Subcommittee. He also serves on the Great Lakes Commission, interstate compact agency that promotes the orderly, integrated, and comprehensive development, use, and conservation of water and related natural resources of the Great Lakes Basin and St. Lawrence River. We probably have a lot of questions. He can be here for hours after. When not tending to legislative duties in Columbus, Senator is a partner at Calfee, Halter, Griswold, LLP, where he has worked for more than 30 years. Throughout his legal career, much of his work has been centered on areas pertaining to antitrust litigation, trade regulation, price fixing, class actions, mergers, and acquisitions. He's a graduate of Washington Lee School of Law, holds a bachelor's degree from Union College, has been named an Ohio super lawyer in antitrust litigation, and is listed in Best Lawyers in America for Antitrust Law. Senator Eklund is active in his community, serving on a number of boards and organizations, including United Way Services of Geauga County, and there's a long list of boards and memberships that he has been an active member of for, looks like, several years. He lives in Munson Township with his wife Peg. He has 2 daughters, Jennifer and Amanda. And again, a special thanks for coming in and filling in, but welcome, Senator Eklund.
Thank you very, very much for that introduction. When I was first appointed to the Senate in November 2011, my wife and I had 0 grandchildren. And the one thing that's not mentioned on the resume there is that now, 6 years later, we have 7. Now, 2 sets of grand twins. Each daughter had a set of grand twins, and a bunch of singles. And, you know, as it happens, I have to bear a certain amount of responsibility for that, and it has nothing to do with the Senate. But the fact of the matter is that I'm a twin, and my sisters are twins. So they say it skips a generation, and I guess it did, but it landed with both feet on my on my daughters. So that's a real delight. But thank you so much for allowing me to be with you today. It's a real thrill. Senator Obhoff, President Obhoff, sends his regrets. He was called to Washington, D.C. to have some policy conversations there on another very important topic, and that is the nation's infrastructure and state needs as far as infrastructure improvement and construction are concerned. So he very much wishes he could be here to talk with you today, but duty called in our nation's capital. And more than thank you for having me, I want to thank you for everything that you all do here in your community. I've met with Rotarians all across many parts of the state over the course of time, and the commitment that you make to your communities and the way you put your shoulders to the wheel is something, as you know, that so many people could take a lesson from. And just imagine for a minute, if you would, if all of us, all the time, do what you do, put service ahead of self, and make a commitment to your communities the way that you do. Ohio's a great place, but it would be even a greater place. Now, I know I'm asked to talk about some challenges and opportunities for Ohio in the energy sector, and I'd be more than happy to do that. Of course, I regard energy policy as, and so much is associated with economic development, but really one of the big four areas that impact economic development, along with energy policy, tax policy, the regulatory environment, and of course workforce development. But energy policy is what we're here to talk about going forward. But before we talk about where we're going, I think it's instructive sometimes to think about where we've been as a state. In 2009 and 2010, the state of Ohio faced an $8 billion structural budget deficit. We had lost something north of 350,000 jobs in the previous years. We had exactly 89 cents in our savings account. College costs were soaring. Ohio led the nation in something not very pretty, in human trafficking. Ohio was a center for human trafficking. Ohio was, in many ways, falling behind. Today, our budget is balanced. We have fewer state employees than we've had in decades. We have gained 459,000 jobs over the last 5.5 years. We now have about $2.5 billion in our savings account. Slowly, college tuition fees and fees are coming down. The rate of growth is substantially slower. Human trafficking has been the subject of numerous bills that we've passed to crack down not just on the supply, but also on the demand. I'm messing this up somehow. We've secured $5 billion in net tax relief for Ohioans over the course of the last 6 years. As a result, our unemployment rate is down and has been persistently below the national average, and our per capita income rate is up and persistently higher than the national average. So, when we are talking about where we're going, we are poised here in Ohio for great things. I really believe that. I cannot think of a more exciting time to be in the General Assembly, or, frankly, to be a citizen of the state of Ohio, because we are poised for great things. Where are we going to go? And let's talk about it in the context of energy. It is a challenging market, and it is a challenging area in which to make policy, and I'll try to describe to you why I feel that way. There is a constant conflict between the desirable result of having a diverse energy portfolio here in the state of Ohio and operating within a competitive marketplace. A number of years ago, Ohio made the decision that we were going to become a competitive energy state. So we deregulated the retail sale of electricity, and now you can buy your electricity anywhere. And that's likely to continue. But the difficulty is that on the wholesale level, that is the generation of power and the creation of the energy and the sale of that energy to those who sell it to you, is the subject of, I'm not going to call it a market, it is a construct that has been devised by the federal government and run by a private enterprise that basically tells those who are subject to it what they can buy, how much of it they need to buy, and what the price is going to be. And that construct, excuse me, all right. Thank you. That construct has a fundamental problem with it, and that is it does not recognize all of the attributes of all of the energy generators that we have in the state of Ohio. It is driven strictly by what is the lowest incremental marginal cost of producing a kilowatt hour of energy. Now, imagine a market construct in the automobile industry which rewarded, it said, you must buy the highest miles per gallon vehicle. That's the only thing that matters in the marketplace. You must buy the vehicle that gets the highest gas mileage. Never mind the fact that you've got 6 kids and they all play soccer and you need to get them to a soccer game. Never. How about that? All right.
I just need to turn this mic off.
Okay. Why, I'm the only one this morning who had a problem with the microphone. Well, so, you know, imagine that, right? So that the market did not allow for recognition of the other attributes that might be important to you. The need for more room, the need for more speed, the need for more safety, the need for, you know, just the stylistic things that you might want to do with a car. But that's the way the wholesale market operates today. Now, that is something that we'd all like to fix, but the problem is federal law says that the states cannot tamper with that particular construct. So we're kind of stuck with it. So in Ohio, in the past, we have tried on a state level to recognize some of the other valuable attributes of energy sources by doing a number of things. Let's take, for example, solar and wind, renewables, alternative energy sources, that sort of thing. We have tried to tinker with the retail market, because that's what we're allowed to do, in order to recognize the fact that while solar and wind are not dispatchable to the great grid that feeds all of the electricity needs here in Northeast Ohio and the country, they're not dispatchable to the grid. They are considerably less reliable. That is to say, when the sun doesn't shine, the solar energy panels don't generate electricity. When the wind doesn't blow, the turbines don't turn and no electricity is generated. They are not terribly resilient, which is to say, in a disaster situation, Hurricane Harvey, Superstorm Sandy, you might recall, they are incapable of generating the electricity on demand that needs to be generated. They are, let's talk about gas. Gas-fired plants certainly are more reliable and somewhat more resilient, but they depend upon a source of fuel which is interruptible, which is to say, if the gas supply is down, or if the pipelines break, or if the pipelines aren't built out, or you get a weather event as occurred down in, particularly in southern Ohio, back in the late 1970s, when the gas could not be delivered because of the freezing cold winters that they were having down there, you interrupt the generation of power there. Nevertheless, in Ohio, we have something called energy mandates that are designed to recognize that despite the shortcomings of solar, despite the shortcomings of wind, despite the shortcomings of other forms of alternative energy, we require by law that the utilities who sell electricity to all of you buy a certain percentage of their electricity from these alternative energy sources. Now, why do we do that? We do it because solar power is clean. Wind power is clean. And we're in pursuit not just of a cleaner environment, which is very, very laudable, but we're in pursuit of this concept of a diverse energy portfolio. Some of all of these things are important to us. So we tinker with the retail market in some respects in order to promote sources of energy that are less than resilient, less than reliable, less than dependable, and interruptible, but we do it because there are other policy considerations involved. The latest issue in that regard is atomic energy. Ohio has 2 nuclear power plants. One of them's up in my district in Lake County, one of them's out in northwest Ohio. And nuclear energy plants have many characteristics that are valuable. They are extremely reliable. They never stop. They cycle them occasionally to do repairs on them, but they never stop. They are resilient in any kind of weather, any kind of emergency, any kind of anything. They continue to operate, largely because they are the only fuel source, the only generating source that has on-site fuel. The nuclear reactor is on-site. It doesn't have to be brought in from any place, and it's not contingent upon supply and demand. It is there, and it's always available. Nuclear plants generate zero noxious emissions. No carbon dioxide, no nitrous oxide, no anything, just steam. The nuclear plants here in Ohio, although there are only 2 of them, generate something like 90% of our emission-free generation here in the state of Ohio. I think that's valuable too. I think the reliability and the resiliency are important as well. So here's where we stand. There are, believe it or not, disagreements among policymakers about the relative values of these various sources of energy. The folks out in northwest Ohio who have a lot of wind would love to see us doing things to promote the construction, the development of wind farms. The folks in southeast Ohio who are sitting atop deposits of shale from which much gas can be extracted by modern means, think that gas-fired plants are the greatest thing since pockets, naturally. I happen to be a little partial to the nuclear form of generation because, again, it's up there in our part of the state. So there are these disagreements that are sometimes driven by parochial and sometimes not quite so selfless interests, but nevertheless, we are trying to find a way, at least from my perspective, to balance out, get rid of those parochial concerns and start thinking about this as a statewide issue, and let's see what we can agree upon when it comes to energy policy. We can agree, I think, that a diverse energy portfolio is a good thing. I think we can agree that we need to have reliable, dependable, resilient sources of generation. I think we can all agree that we would like to have our environment as clean as we possibly can. And don't forget, the generation of electricity in Ohio and everywhere else is a big, big business. It is an employer. The generation of electricity can do wonders for us in terms of employment. It powers our industries, not just our homes, and our ability to provide reasonably priced electricity to industry can be a very important factor in drawing businesses into the state of Ohio and helping those that are here operate on a very profitable and helpful level. So we can agree on all of those things. It's just a question of how do we go about, through legislation, making the policies that are just right. It's sort of like mama bear, papa bear, baby bear, right? That's not too hot, not too cold, just right. And that creates not a small amount of controversy or arm wrestling, let's just say, down in Columbus. There are those who think that these mandates that I described to you, requiring the utility companies to buy a certain percentage of their energy from solar or wind or some other alternative energy source, they think that's communism. It is a controlled market, basically, rather than letting market forces operate. It's the government telling the market how to operate. We currently have in Ohio, in law, some of the most restrictive setback requirements for wind turbines in the country. How far away from an inhabited building must these turbines be? How many can you put in certain square miles? I mean, it's some of the most restrictive in the country. And there are those who think that's exactly the way it should be because the turbines do, in some respects or another, interfere with the property rights of a landowner. And when you get conflicts between property rights and business rights, that conflict always exists, and you have to try to find the right balance. That's right. At the same time, there are those who believe that these setbacks are absolutely devastating to the wind-powered industry. And let's face it, wind power, and it's been demonstrated up in Northwest Ohio, does generate jobs, it does generate manufacturing, and it does generate economic development in places where otherwise there might not be any. So there's another flashpoint, if you will. And gas, well, look, the gas folks are sitting in Ohio where we have the potential to generate a tremendous amount of gas to fire electrical plants and to do other things with. Developing gas-fired power plants would be a boon to Southeast Ohio, a part of our state, quite honestly, that hasn't had opportunities like that in multiple generations. So they're very excited about that. On the nuclear side, we are seeing across the country nuclear power plants, because of the current construct in which we're all operating, are closing prematurely because they just cannot operate functionally within the construct that the federal government has established for us. The Department of Energy in Washington just recently issued a report. I think it's about 186 pages long, so forgive me, I haven't read it all yet. But recognizing the fact that the current construct could be the end of nuclear power generation here in the United States of America. And when you're talking in the state of Ohio, 2 power plants that generate something like 15% of all of the electricity that is generated in the state of Ohio, that's terribly significant. And as I said, 90% of the emission-free generation here in the state of Ohio. So the questions before the General Assembly these days around these issues go something like this. Number one, should we maintain the mandates or should we not maintain the mandates? The governor has expressed a desire to maintain the mandates and continue this climb up mandate mountain where the percentage of renewable and alternative energy that needs to be purchased in Ohio ever creeps higher, 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 until it gets to 25% in 2025. Should we continue that march, or should we somehow adjust our sails and recognize the fact that many of these renewable and alternative energy sources already have a tremendous leg up on their competition because of the federal subsidies that they have gotten over the many, many years, all of which some people say, well, they're going to be phased out in 2 or 3 years. Those subsidies will be phased out. They've been saying that for 15 years. And it doesn't appear to me that that's ever going to happen. Should we keep the mandates? Number two, in the wind area, what are we going to do about these setbacks? There have been legislative proposals to ease them, all right, which have not gained much traction yet, but I fully expect there'll be another bill introduced this fall to ease those setback requirements for solar, to encourage solar development, and it's probably going to be mostly up in Northwest Ohio. But, you know, we can do that, and but there's going to be a debate about that too, because there are those who think the setbacks are there to protect property rights of other people, and that the renewables and the alternate energy sources get plenty of help from the federal government and don't need yet another leg up. And on the atomic nuclear side, I have introduced a bill that would, through a series of mechanisms, allow our market, our retail market here in Ohio, to recognize the values of nuclear energy by creating zero-emission nuclear credits, which the public utilities would have to purchase, and then pass the cost of those credits on to ratepayers. Now, you know, when you start talking to people about increasing their electricity bill, you get a lot of this, all right? And I understand that. But I'm telling you, if we don't do something that allows for the recognition of the value that nuclear generation provides to Ohio, those plants are likely to close, and then what will happen? We lose diversity, we reduce competition, fewer competitors means less competition, we reduce resilience of our system, we reduce dependability and reliability, and at the end of the day, when there are fewer suppliers of anything, what generally happens to the price in the long run? Oh, it goes up. Yes, it does. The laws of economics do not bow to the laws of the state of Ohio. So these are some of the things that we're facing. I can't see the clock right. Oh, here we go. So I've probably spoken about long enough, I think, but I wanted to leave some time for some questions if you all had any, and I'd be most happy to try to answer them. And again, I really very much appreciate the opportunity to be here. President Obhoff is a tough guy to stand in for. He's done things in the Senate that real leaders do. He's promoted an air of dialogue and discourse, created a sense that there's room for debate and dissent without losing control and without being dictatorial about it. And he's another part of the reason why I really do believe that we're on our way here in Ohio to becoming the greatest state in the United States of America to live and to work and to raise a family. So thank you, President Obhoff. Enjoy your trip to Washington, and I'd be happy to try to answer any questions you have.
Question, thank you very much, Senator, for that fascinating presentation on the whole electric industry. It seems to me when we build a power plant of any kind, whether it's coal-fired or gas-fired or nuclear energy, you're looking at a 40, 50-year investment. These plants last a long, long time. Mm-hmm. And then you look at the other side of the equation and you look at the price of gas, for example, it can fluctuate tremendously. How do you reconcile it?
I don't know that there's any reconcile. The question is, well, you know, these are 40-year investments when you build a power plant, and there are so many variables that can affect how they are going to operate and their profitability over the course of time. Very much true. I don't know that there's any reconciling that, but it demonstrates the very point you're raising, demonstrates to me the significance and the importance of a diverse energy portfolio. You know, if the price of gas goes through the roof, trust me, anyone who's generating electricity with gas is going to raise the price of their electricity. It's as simple as that. But when the price of gas goes up, maybe the price of coal goes down. Maybe the price of of generating wind goes down. And you have to have these options available to account for the very vagaries of markets that you're describing. And I think it's exactly the right point to focus on. Yes, sir.
Senator, you spoke of the advantages of nuclear and not really much about the disadvantages that seem to be stifling the growth of nuclear in the United States, which presumably are the dangers of getting rid of the old fuel and the dangers of weaponization, presumably of people attacking those. However, there are now small modular molten salt reactors running on thorium. Why don't we see any of that proposed in Ohio?
As a matter of fact, and the question is about small packaged nuclear plants using molten salt, operating using, instead of uranium, they're using thorium. Beautiful. We passed a resolution in the Ohio Senate last year encouraging the federal government to open the doors to the development of thorium plants. It stands to be revolutionary. And I'll tell you what I've understood in talking to the people who are promoting thorium plants. The reason we don't have them, short answer, is because the federal government doesn't allow them. All right? You just cannot do it, period. The reason that is because back in the day when there was really a battle in the earliest days of nuclear energy over whether we should go with thorium plants or uranium plants. Why do you think we went with uranium plants? We had access to the fuel, but as importantly, uranium can be used to make bombs, weapons, right? And the technology to work with the uranium in the generation of nuclear power is transferable into the military side of things. And so thorium lost the race, uranium won the race, and here we are. But I agree with you that that option for nuclear energy ought to be explored. The federal government ought to do it. The federal government also ought to get off the dime and wrestle with and come to grips with the issue of the disposal of spent nuclear waste. It can be done, but you know, that's another policy issue at the federal level that's kind of been intractable. Yes, ma'am.
The one source, potential source that you didn't mention is the gains from efficiency through conservation policy. And I know that at one point in time, from the 70s through at least to the 90s, Ohio had a very strong policy that was supposed to foster conservation. I heard that that had been dismantled. Where are we with gains from efficiency?
The question is about gains from efficiency from an energy policy. We still have efficiency standards and efficiency requirements in Ohio, and they are continuing to be used, and many particularly many industries think they're terrific. You know, they do, for example, peak power programs where they agree in exchange for a lower rate on their electric bill that when demand is going through the roof on a hot summer day or an extremely cold winter's day, they'll take less energy so that it can be diverted to other people who might need it. And those programs are alive and well. But again, the question becomes, if those programs save customers money, are the utility companies then going to turn around and charge a higher price to other people in order to pay for those programs? I was with a company up in Lake County a year or two ago, and they were all about energy efficiency. They changed out the lights, they did all the low-hanging fruit. You know, they changed out the windows to make them more energy efficient. They saved a lot of money on their electric bill, but because they were more efficient and they had lowered their costs, they were able to bid on some additional work. They won the additional work, which required them to go out and buy a new manufacturing line for about $500,000, and all of their energy savings went, were consumed with that cost. So it's a great idea, and we continue to do it in Ohio, and we should. And you're right, as far as energy policy, it is an important part of achieving those things we want to achieve. Less expensive energy, diverse, reliable, resilient power.
And the production of energy that is also efficient, where are we on that? Because right now, the most expensive way to produce steam, i.e. boil water, is nuclear. So if you're pushing for a better nuclear future, then should we also not think about the efficiency of producing that?
We should, and I would like to think that in a free market economy, that those who do anything are going to be looking for a more efficient way to do it over the course of time. Maybe thorium is the answer. But the per kilowatt hour cost of generating in nuclear, is and if you're talking life cycle from digging the uranium out of the ground and bringing it forward, that's another equation altogether. But just operating the plant and per kilowatt hour of operating the plant is really pretty competitive, and has been for a long, long time. But life cycle, you're right. But I haven't seen the numbers on the life cycle. As a matter of fact, the life cycle costs, I'm told, of a nuclear power plant, environmental impact anyway, is lower than it is for wind turbines, for all of them. So, but yeah, that's a part of the equation. But I would like, again, to think that the people who operate, just like a gas plant operator should be thinking about more efficient ways to operate a gas plant, and God knows, I think they do a pretty good job of it in terms of the wind farms, in operating those efficiently. But remember too, efficiency oftentimes means fewer humans involved. And you look at a wind farm and the number of people who work, once the thing's up and running, the number of people who work at a wind farm is very, very few. Whereas at a nuclear power plant or a gas-fueled power plant, it's substantially more. So from an employment standpoint, but this is the message I'm trying to deliver to all of you, is that every one of these resources has their value. Every one of these resources has something to contribute to the big picture. The trick is going to be to find a way to acknowledge all of them, reward them, and make everybody equally miserable, I guess. Yes. Yes, ma'am.
Hi, thank you for coming. From the perspective of the federal current administration and the construct, what are the odds that there would be alleviated in the state?
The question is, what about the current federal administration and this construct that I've been describing to you? And I think the chances are that it's going to be given a good hard look. And I think that's the message that came out of the report that was provided to Secretary Perry at the Department of Energy. Bottom line is, look, this is a problem and something ought to be done to fix it. We have reached out to the organization that runs the electrical grid that includes Ohio, and said to them, look, we're moving forward in Ohio with some initiatives here to address the defect in this construct. We're happy to work with you. You're operating it. You know what you're doing. Come to us with some ideas. We'll give you some ideas about how we can tinker with it in order to maybe alleviate the need to do anything on a state statutory basis, right? We haven't heard back from them yet. But they're just a functionary. The real change would have to be through legislation at the federal level. And the Secretary of Energy is saying, we're going to start looking at this and encouraging the parties to start looking at it and coming forward with ideas that will fix the problem.
Quick one. So I would advocate for maintaining support for renewables for a couple things. First of all, we talk about environmental impact, and either nuclear and others are obviously less impact if everything's going well. But the environmental than just a nice to have. It's critical to our health, our industry, and so forth. So I would put that as a high priority, not just as a nice addition. Secondly, all industries, if you look at nuclear, cars, phones, everything, when they first started out, they were very unreliable, needed a lot of support. In the case of nuclear, probably a lot of government, I don't know specifically, research and other investment. And I would advocate that the renewables are still in that position, particularly with energy storage and that sort of thing. And then the idea of the setbacks, obviously you don't want people to be endangered, but it's a little ironic that with gas fracking, that a lot of those rules do not apply. You can put up a well and not need permission from a neighbor, and there's good reasons for that, so I'm not saying that's wrong, but just want it to be treated equally. And there was a good quote from the Saudis, who are actually investing heavily in renewables, and someone said, well, why are you doing this? You have more oil than anyone else in the world. And they said, well, they didn't get out of the Stone Age because they ran out of stones. So I think, I would just advocate not, that I agree with the diversity, that we should still continue to support it, have these requirements, and see if we can facilitate the growth of alternative fuels as well as the traditional ones.
I hope that that's been part of the message that I've been trying to deliver, that it is it is a very desirable thing. And you can't say we need to recognize the attributes, the positive attributes of nuclear without saying we should recognize the positive attributes of wind. You can't say that we should recognize the positive impact that the shale oil is going to be having and gas-powered plants are going to be having without recognizing the values and the attributes of solar. What's sauce for the goose is sauce for the gander. But the question again will be the extent to which we can get away from the parochial interests that tend to drive policy sometimes, or that influence policy, whether they are regional within the state or industrial, okay? I'm telling you, trust me, the people who are poised to build and are building gas-powered generating plants today are rubbing their hands at the prospects that 2 nuclear power plants go dark in Ohio. Trust me, because that is 15% of the generation in Ohio that needs to be replaced. And it's either going to be replaced by generation here in Ohio, or it's going to be replaced by generation someplace else. And when you look at the numbers, the states that are the biggest net importers of power, energy in America, the cost of energy is the highest. And where in the states that are the net exporters of power, that is, they generate more than they need, the prices of energy are substantially lower. So that's another thing to bear in mind when you're talking about the closing of plants. But how do we temper those parochial interests and make people understand, you know something, we got a much bigger issue that we're looking at here, and it's called the 11.5 million people in the state of Ohio and all the businesses that are here as well. I really very much thank you for your time.